So, welcome back to BinSpector demo training. At least these are suggested tips that we have for you guys that would really improve the customer interaction, I think, that you'll have out there in the field. Since it's new technology, people don't really understand how it works. What you'll see here and what you guys saw at the GSI demo is how impressive it really is. Here we have the sensor head that we talked about before, and you have the dust shroud. This is the first line of defense I like to tell the customers. This hangs like this in the bin. It allows the dust to settle past the sensor because the dust is heavier than the air. And there's a weather-tight connection on the top of the sensor shroud because if there's condensing on the roof and it runs down the cable, we don't want that water running into the sensor box. What I do for the demos is you'll want to loosen the seal-tight connection and slide the sensor out. You'll slide the sensor out, I suggest, to about 3/4 of the way, and then tighten it up a little bit again. And there's a couple reasons for this. It allows you then to show the customer, because they all want to know, how are you guys handling the dust? Okay, we've talked about defense number one. Defense number two is a very unique patented passive approach you guys have seen, but this diffusion tube allows the air and the gas to move into the sensor chamber without the dust moving into the sensor chamber. And then the third line of defense is the paper filter, the fabric filter that is on the outlet end of the diffusion tube before it gets into the cast housing. So that's the setup. What we tell the customer is that, as you can see, this is number 2 yellow corn. One of the things I like to do, just kind of from a touch feel, is I have typically a couple of small sample bags so that they can put this in their hand. They can see, because farmers are pretty quickly recognize good corn versus corn that's got quality problems. So I let them see that, and then I explain it's all been from the same batch, it's been from the same bin, it's all the same corn, there isn't anything special about any of this corn. The only difference is we have added some moisture to both of these buckets. These are scaled down versions of an actual bin condition. We are trying to bring the moisture content of the grain up so that we can see and measure exactly what's going on. That is it's an exact duplication of what happens in the bin when you have a condition problem. I also like to have laminated graphs, and I hand those out so they can see. So when I'm in this bucket, they can also be looking at, and I can explain how this represents, or this is exactly like a full-scale bin. So that's something I'll point to for you guys really quickly. I'm going to move this all aside. Of course, I like to have a binder that shows how the system is brought together. People can see that. So what I tell them is, look at the baseline. Look at the baseline so you are familiar with where we started. And then I explain that ambient air, depending on your location, the location conditions, a little bit of drift between sensor to sensor, but you're going to be between 400 and 600 ppm starting out. So this is a bin that has a sample of what I consider to be good, healthy grains, safe for storage. So I stick this in. Remember, it refreshes every 10 seconds. So on this part of the demo, it's the slowest. There may be very little change. Now they have a baseline, and I tell them, this is what I expect. I expect a healthy bin to look exactly like this. So I expect a red flat line as we're monitoring this bin all the way through its storage season. So then what I like to do is just to give them more confirmation that I didn't just hang up a bag of grain, I let them look in there. And, of course, this is very quick. Usually people stick their hand in and say, yep, that's good number 2 corn as far as I'm concerned. Got it. We're now going to go into the 10-day moist bucket. Don't take the lid off first to show them. wait until this occurs. So we started at about 450. The first reading, as the CO2 is moved into the sampling chamber, is about 800 ppm. The second reading is 2600 ppm. So we're starting to ratchet in a couple thousand ppm increments. 4,000 ppm. This is kind of what I expect to see. So the level of concentration in this younger bin, earlier in spoilage, is going at a little slower gradient. We're at 6,600 ppm. Now remember, this is way over 5 times baseline. And so what will happen is this, because it's gapped for you all also, by the way, is sometimes you'll want to swing this between the two bins. It will begin to dial down fairly quickly. They usually are expecting this to be pretty dramatic. I often hear, I think it's going to be black. So I make sure and open this lid up and let them look into this bin. We want them to look in this bin. Typically, their eyes bug out because they look at that grain and say, wow, that's still good corn. That's good yellow corn. I let them feel it because they can feel that it's a little higher moisture content. It's moist enough that you can feel the higher moisture content in the grain. And then, as you can see here, it's still pouring, right? This would come out of a bin. It's sticky when it comes out of a bin, but I make sure it tipped the bin over. And I want them to see the bottom of the bin, because this is what could happen in the bottom of their bin or on the sidewalls of the bin. Or this is what happens when the bin is crusty. And the whole point of this monitor is that it's an early detector. It's the most sensitive detector commercially available for grain condition problems. So then we go into the 30-day bin. We were down at 670 ppm. We're now in the bin that's been high moisture content the longest. Now let's watch this, because this is typically going to happen fast. Okay, we went from 700 to 3,500. It's pretty typical to see a bin in this state that it's going to be incrementing in 3,000 to 5,000 ppm increments. And again, you want to tell the customer that we are not trying, it's not important for us to see 10 and 15 and 20,000 ppm. That's what we can see. So this bucket has already risen to 26,000 parts per million. And so what I want you guys to be able to do is show them, and these numbers are really dramatic, but key into alarm conditions are at 2, 3, alarming is at 4 and 5 times baseline. You guys all have in your packets from GSI plenty of experiences where a bin has gone to 6,000 parts per million, and then the discovery in the bin was that there was grain condition problems all the way down the side of that bin, and photographs were taken all the way down as that bin was being reclaimed. First, you want to ask the customer, what do you think the condition of the grain is, and before you open up this bin. Pretty much when you take the lid off, you can smell the mold and the sourness that's going on in this bucket. You actually can't really smell it in this early stage, but you can really smell it here, which is classically the way your farm customers find their problem. You let them look in there, and they're by now thinking 30 days, this is black grain. So obviously you turn the bucket, and they can see it's starting to gray. Most of the kernels in this bin have mold growth on the whole kernel. It's not oxidized, it's not black yet, so it's not like the classic, black balls and goo and the conditions that are going to clog up the center wells during reclaim, etc. But most of this bin, and there is condensation like there would be on the roof because of the high moisture content, the cycle, is really repeating itself. The mold will create water and CO2 and a little bit of heat, and so that's where a lot of that condensation is coming from in the biological consumption of that grain. We can tell them way back here that there is a problem, not to the level of this problem. So that really is our suggested tips on how to get your customers to be able to really see what's going on. It's pretty intuitive. There's no black box or magic going on here. It's well-known chemical processes and biological processes that are going on. If you have any further questions, I think you've all met Tim O'Connor. Please feel free to give him a call. Thank you.